Hello, everyone. We want to welcome you to our Brain Science Behind Vroom and Vroom's Brain Building Tools webinar. My name is Patience Hill, and I am the Community Outreach Project Manager for the Vroom Partnership Project here at Child Care Aware of America. And we also have Candy with us today, and I'll have Candy introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name's Candy Novak and I'm the Vroom Technical Assistance Specialist at Child Care Aware of America.
Thank you, Candy. We are very excited to have you on board as our new Vroom ambassadors, and we really look forward to working with you and telling you all about Vroom and how it can help your outreach. So during this webinar, please jot down any questions you may have. You can also email any questions afterwards to vroom@usa.childcareaware.org. And also, when we have our first Technical Assistance Exchange group call on January 9th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we will go over any questions you needed answered. So now I will hand it over to Candy.
Thank you, Patience. As Patience said, we're so excited to have you join us on this project for the Vroom initiative through Child Care Aware of America. So I'm going to share with you some of what you will be hearing and learning about in today's webinar. So today's webinar will do the following. It's going to reinforce your knowledge of early brain development and also for you to learn the science behind Vroom. It's also going to introduce you to Vroom's messages, tools, and resources, increase your understanding of the relationship Vroom holds in our national child care resource and referral community, and also help you develop a deeper understanding of how brain building strategies can be easily integrated into child care resource and referral services and outreach to families, providers, and community partners. So we're going to start off today with some brain science knowledge and see what your brain science IQ is. So to get us warmed up for this session, we're going to share some true or false statements that will be read to you on the next slide. After I read each statement, I'll pause for you to jot down your answers on a piece of paper, whether the statement is true or false, and then in a little while we'll share the correct answers with you. All right. At birth, the infant's brain is the most mature organ in the body. True or false? And number two, you can jot down your answer for this. True or false? A young child's brain develops gradually during the first 3 years of life. Number three, how the baby's brain will develop its foundation for learning is sculpted by the relationships the baby experiences. Number four, true or false? By the age of 5, children's brains have grown to 90% of full size. Number 5, we are born with the most brain synapses we will ever have. And lastly, number 6, true or false? A child's brain more than doubles in mass during the first year after birth and reaches 80% of adult size by 2 years of age. So now we're going to go ahead and review each statement to see whether they were true or false and to see how you did. So number 1, at birth, the infant's brain is the most mature organ in the body. If you answered false, you're correct. At birth, the infant's brain is actually the most immature organ in the body. Number 2, a young child's brain develops gradually during the first 3 years of life is false. The brain growth surges during the first 2,000 days of life. Number 3, how the baby's brain will develop its foundation for learning is sculpted by the relationships the baby experiences. This is absolutely true. The baby's brain is built on early relationships. It's the foundation of early brain development. And that's both positive and negative experiences that the child experiences that builds a child's brain. And number 4, by the age of 5, children's brains have grown to 90% of full size. True. Early brain development has a lasting impact on a child's ability to learn, how they get along with others, and for the rest of their lives, their success in life. Number 5, we are born with the most brain synapses that we will ever have. This is false. Neurons, or what we call brain cells, make up the brain, but it's the actual synapses that where all the connections are happening. So these connections or synapses are happening between the neurons. And number 6, a child's brain more than doubles in mass during the first year after birth and reaches 80% of adult size by 2 years of age. This is true. 80% of the brain is developed by the age of 2, 85% of the brain is developed by the age of 3, and 90% or more of the brain is developed by the age of 5, which is just incredible and really shows us that the impact of early brain development is significant in those first 5 years of life and have a lasting impact on the rest of their lives. So how do we know all of this about early brain development and information on the connections that are happening in the brain in the first 5 years of life? Well, it's from the early brain research that is happening. And there's a lot of brain research that's being done from the University of Washington, specifically in their lab called the Institute for Learning and Brains Institute, or what we call the iLabs. So in the iLabs, there's just been a revolution of how we understand children's minds, their brains, and their capacity to learn. We now know that children learn, feel, and know so much more than we ever imagined in those early years. So in laboratories at iLabs and others around the world, children's natural curiosity and drive to learn is being uncovered in basic research studies and is being now shared out in communities. So the iLab leadership is under 2 people. They are co-directors. And it's Dr. Patricia Cole and Dr. Andrew Metzoff. And they are the co-directors for iLabs at the University of Washington. And the iLabs are now home to a 1-ton machine. And you see it pictured here. We call this the MEG machine, the MEG machine. And it can safely read the mind of young babies as little as 7 pounds, and just gives us very important information on how and where and when learning is happening in some of our youngest children's brains. So this machine is very sensitive to imaging the brain and showing us the activity that's happening inside an infant's brain, and proves that newborn brains are anything but empty. There's a lot happening in those brains. And this machine is the only machine in the world that measures the human brain over time, beginning as early as 2 months, as I said. It can measure also the activity or the interaction that's happening between a child and a caregiver. So as you can see this baby in the picture, she is actually looking at her caregiver as the brain activity is being measured by the machine. So there's some interactioning happening between her trusted caregiver and herself as the brain activity is being recorded. So the MEG machine will record the brain cells and the interactions between the neurons, or those synapses, those connections that are happening, as the interaction is taking place. So the brain science behind Vroom. So Vroom is built on brain science. So really taking the brain science out of the labs, taking that research and sharing it with families in our early childhood community and our, communities in general. So we're going to talk a little bit just about some of the brain architecture that's happening in the early years. So the brain architecture is really, the brains are really built over time from the bottom up. And so some of the very early sensory pathways that are first to develop in a young child's brain are the basic vision and hearing. And then later on, it will be followed by early language skills that are being developed, and then up to those higher cognitive functioning skills. So things such as problem solving and impulse control, which we'll talk about in more detail in a little while. Brain architecture is comprised of billions of connections between individual neurons across different areas of the brain. So there's a lot happening in those brains early on, a lot of connections being made. I kind of like to think of it as little sparks happening in the brain as those connections are being made. The interactions of genes and experience shape the developing brain. So we know that genetics are involved, as well as the experiences children have. Both are key components of shaping the developing brain. Some more things to consider about brain architecture are cognitive, emotional, social capacities are inextricably intertwined throughout the life course. So all of these work together. Cognitive development, emotional development, and social capacities. Those are all working together at the same time. And something to remember is not only are the positive experiences building these young children's brains, but also the experiences that may be more negative. And toxic stress, things that are extremely negative for children, toxic stress can actually weaken the architecture of the developing brain, which can impact them for lifelong. It can impact their learning capacity, their behavior development, as well as their physical and mental health. So here we just wanted to show you a picture of an actual brain cell, or what we call a neuron. And these neurons when we are born, we have the most neurons we will ever have. But as a baby has different experiences, and as we mentioned earlier, built on relationships, these neurons will make connections with one another. So these pathways are being built over time. And these connections, as we mentioned earlier, are called brain synapses. So the brain synapses are happening because of stimulation by early relationships and interactions. Scientists estimate that the brain makes 1 million neural connections each second from birth to age 3. So as we mentioned earlier in our true to false quiz, that there's just this surge in connections being made. And we can definitely see that in this statement here, that 1 million neural connections each second from birth to age 3. It's also almost hard to imagine. As the brain makes more connections, those neural connections build the brain. So in a moment, we're going to see a slide where you're going to see how those connections are just building over time in the young brain. So here we start with a newborn, and brain cells are not much good unless connections are being made. So once those brain cells start connecting with one another, those synapses are occurring, then the brain is being built and developed. And after birth, so at about 1 month, you can see that these brain cells are making connections all the time. You can see that it's becoming more dense and connections are being made. And here we go at 3 months. You can see more connections. And look here at 6 months. And if you can imagine what you know of a 6-month-old being able to do, what are they doing at 6 months of age? Think about their language development, their motor skills at this time. So you can kind of imagine these connections are becoming, more frequent and occurring more often. And look at 1. A lot more connections happening. And 2. And 4. Wow. Lots of brain activity happening. But then we see at age 6, we see a little bit more white area. And this is actually a good thing. Connections are still being made, those pathways are still being made, but there is something happening during this age. This is when pruning begins. So around age 5, there's a natural process called pruning, where the brain is starting to prune off those connections that aren't being used as often. And this actually strengthens the brain, and those other connections just become so much stronger because it's something that they are going to use more often. So if we think in terms of language development, those pathways are going to become stronger just based on the experiences children are surrounded with their own home languages, or if they are, if they're bilingual, there's going to be more connections made because they are speaking, more than one language. But those pathways are definitely being strengthened for the language that they're experiencing in their home. So when we think about Vroom and how it came to be, Vroom is based on 3 key scientific principles. So every resource, material, tool that Vroom has created, to be shared with families in the community, it's based on these 3 key scientific principles. And the first one is positive relationships, back and forth interactions, and lastly, life skills promoting executive functions. And I'm going to go into more detail about each one of these. So when it comes to relationships, as we said earlier, the brain being developed is really based on those early experiences, those early relationships with trusted adults in a baby's life. So humans, we are just hardwired for relationships with others. We need people. So when babies are born, these early relationships are critical because babies are born seeking that connection with other humans, and they learn from those relationships. In children, their first teachers are their mother, their father, or another trusted, loving caregiver. So to have healthy social, emotional, mental, physical, and cognitive development, infants really need a nurturing and affectionate relationship for those things to occur. We also mentioned back and forth moments, those back and forth interactions. And I think T. Barry Brazelton captures it here very nicely. He kind of makes it, helps us envision what a back and forth moment may look like between a child and a trusted adult. So reading to children at night, responding to their smiles with a smile, returning their vocalizations with one of your own, touching them, holding them, all of these further a child's brain development and future potential, even in the earliest months. So once again, just thinking about that this early brain development really does start at birth. And the back and forth moments are critical for that. And here we have another quote from Jack Shonkoff. There is no healthy social, emotional, and cognitive progression in the absence of relationships. There is no development without relationships. So I think you're probably hearing a key theme here, that relationships are critical. They are key to early development. So the third key principle that we mentioned was executive function skills. And if we think about how the brain is built from the bottom up, the executive function skills are those higher cognitive skills. So Vroom has built their tools also on, this key principle, this idea of executive function skills. So there are different components here for executive function skills, such as focus, that ability to be able to pay attention, working memory, being able to hold information for a brief time and then being able to use it. So for example, if I say to a child, put on your jacket and boots to go outside, my 4-year-old would most likely be able to go get their jacket, put on their boots to go outside. They'd be able to hold that 2-step direction in their working memory and be able to use it. That is a higher cognitive skill. And then we also have cognitive flexibility. This is also an executive function skill. So being able to shift gears, being able to nimbly adjust to needs and demands. So if we say to a group of children, maybe in childcare, we're going inside now, we need to use our quiet voices because the babies are sleeping, that they can shift from using their loud, playful voices outdoors to start using their more quiet indoor voices. Then lastly, we have inhibitory control, and this is being able to resist temptations, just controlling their impulses. So what is Vroom? So by now, you have most likely explored Vroom on your own, have done a little research about some of the resources that are available, but we also wanted to share with you, today just what Vroom is built on, what is behind how Vroom was created, and the resources and tools that are available to you and to families. So Vroom is an initiative. It's an initiative to inform everyone, families, our early childhood professionals, our communities, to inform everyone that our children's first years are when they develop the foundation for all future learning. So getting everyone to think very early on that children are developing these skills that will last a lifetime. Vroom is a mission to change the way we think about how young children learn in development. It really is a movement and a mind shift to get us to think differently about how we approach and think about young children's learning and development. Vroom is also an outreach strategy to reach families where they are in a non-judgmental way. Vroom is a source of latest brain research that helps to turn everyday moments into brain-building moments. So whether a family is at the grocery store, as you see pictured, or they're giving their child a bath, or they're going on a walk, or they're doing laundry, that they can take those everyday moments and turn it into a moment that is boosting their early learning. And Vroom is also a family and community engagement outreach strategy to help parents and families and their child's to be their child's first teacher. So we also wanted to share with you Vroom's core principles. So some things that these principles guided how they developed their tools and resources, but also their approach to families. So Vroom's core principles are to withhold judgment. So when engaging with parents, it's important to remember, and Vroom's message also is that they want parents to hear positive messages and not corrective messages. The second core principle that Vroom's built on is to speak in the voice of parents' peers. Vroom really takes into account the realities of parents' lives, and it's really delivered in a tone similar to that of the sources of information that they already trust. And I really like this one. Aim for more and better rather than most and best. Vroom's goals are attainable. They remind parents that they already have all that it takes to help build their child's brain. I like this one also. Number 4, meet parents where they are. So whether a parent is at home, in their neighborhood, at a child care center, they can, help their child learn. So it's just part of their daily life. And number 5, celebrate identities that parents already embrace. So whether the teen mom, a grandparent, a single dad, never underestimate the power of a parent or another family member. And don't be afraid to talk about the science with parents. So Vroom has really taken this opportunity to share the research in a way that's easy to understand, that's easily digestible, but yet also very motivating. So sharing with parents, why is it important to engage children in these daily routines? Why is it beneficial to have your child help you match socks while doing laundry? So taking the science from the lab and sharing the why with parents. Why is it important to have these important interactions on a daily basis? So brain building moments are happening all around us. So we're going to start with sharing some of Vroom's brain building tools with you. And you, as I said, may have already started exploring to see what type of resources and tools and messages that Vroom has that you will be able to share through your child care resource and referral agency. So the next slide is taking brain science out of the lab and bringing it to families and communities. And here's just a couple examples of how they've done this. It's showing that this first flyer that you'll see is the brain story flyer. And they've taken that information about early brain development from day one and how the brain develops over time, and they've put it on a flyer. And we want you to really start thinking about, well, how could we use this information? How could we use this flyer to share with our child care community, with our families that we encounter, with our community partners? So this is just one example of many of something that can be shared in your family and community engagement at your agencies. So starting here, you'll see that maybe this is something that could be shared at a professional development training with child care center staff, Head Start staff, family child care home providers. Could it be shared at a parent workshop where, if you are a part of a parent workshop, could you share this information with families? Maybe even a community partner meeting. I'm going to give you a moment here. As you see, there's a couple blanks. So if you have some thoughts coming to mind of how you might share the brain story flyer, I'd like to give you a moment to just jot those ideas down. Okay. So once again, I know that this flyer may be a little bit more difficult to see, but if you go to vroom.org and go to the professional tab, you'll be able to see this flyer more up close and really see that the flyer is talking about how connections are being made early on, and the more experience that a child has over the course of time, the stronger the connections will be. The next flyer that we wanted to share with you is what is called the Brain Building Basics flyer. So this flyer has taken the 3 principles that we spoke about earlier, the positive relationships, the back and forth interactions, and the executive function skills, and they've broken them down into 5 actionable steps. So 5 things that a parent or a caregiver can build into an interaction with a child. So it's look, follow, chat, take turns, and stretch. So this flyer, once again, could be incorporated into some of the outreach and services that you provide through your CCR&R. And we will go over this information more in depth with you later on, but we would invite you to take a close look at this flyer and the 5 brain building basics. And also there's a video that goes along with this that we'll share in a moment. But I'm going to pause once again for you to write down to see if you have any thoughts or ideas of how you might incorporate this brain building basics flyer into your CCR&R. And we have the slide up here. This is the Brain Building Basics video, and you can access this through the vroom.org website, or you can also go on to the YouTube channel and just put in Brain Building Basics, and this video is a lovely video of how the brain building basics is being used in everyday interactions, and it's being shown with different interactions between parents and children in the video. And then we're going to move on to brain building tips.
Thank you, Candy. So now you've heard about the science and you've heard about some of the flyers that Vroom has produced. Now we're going to talk about some of the brain building tips. And these tips are very popular and what Vroom is known for, so you may be familiar with these. And this is an example of what a Vroom tip looks like. If you see on the left side in the bottom corner, there's an age range. So Vroom tips go from birth to 5. So there are 5 categories, and they're all color-coded as well. And then on the right side at the bottom, you see joinvroom.org. You can use joinvroom.org or vroom.org to access more of these tips. So this tip is called a changing conversation. When you're changing your child, make a funny sound. How does he or she respond? By smiling, kicking his or her legs, making a sound. Try a new sound and see what he or she does. Keep adding new ones to the mix. So again, this is a Vroom tip of an activity or an engagement to do with the child. And a lot of times you'll notice that these aren't anything new, but this is stuff that parents and providers and caregivers are already doing with young children. But what makes it unique is the brainy background. So here you can see the brainy background. It says back and forth conversations can happen even without words. You are teaching your child about how conversations work. First one person speaks, then the other. This is an early and important lesson about the pleasure and skill of communicating, a skill that's important in school and in life. So again, this is all research-based but put into user-friendly language. And so that's what makes the Vroom tips so unique and resourceful for parents, caregivers, and providers. And at the bottom here, you can see, again, those 5 brain building basics that Candy mentioned. So look, follow, chat, take turns, and stretch. And here are some more examples of Vroom tips. This one is called the hand wash. Let your child be your partner as you wash up before dinner. Say, it's time to wash our hands, yours and mine. Put soap on both your hands and lather up. Be silly as you dry your hands off together. Do you shake dry, toss the towel back and forth, make a hand jumble? What else? And then again, we have the brain background. Making your child your partner in hand washing helps him or her learn about this important routine. A back and forth conversation with words and gestures builds your relationships too. Say, you can wash your hands. So again, this is another Vroom tip. And then we also have the age group at the bottom left-hand corner. This is for ages 1 through 2. And again, it has the website to access more tips. And one thing we love about these Vroom tips is they're great to share on social media. And here's another example of a Vroom tip called the Cup Tower. This activity is very popular to do at outreach events with the community. Here we have a photo from one of our first Vroom ambassadors through our Palette project, and this is from Child Care Resource Center in California. And so they actually had a copy of the Cup Tower tip at their event, and you can see here that adults and children were able to participate in the tip together. And here is another Vroom tip. Again, this is the same age range, 1 through 2, and this one's called Mirror Mirror, and you can see the adult and the child interacting in that activity, and you can see the tips right there on the table as well for others to participate. And this again is another community outreach event from Child Care Resource Center in California. So let's talk about the digital brain building resources. So the Daily Vroom app, this is where you can access over 1,000 of these Vroom tips, and you can access the app via a smartphone, a tablet, and now you can go on the vroom.org website and sign in and access the tips there as well. And here is one of the promotional postcards that talks about the Vroom app. Again, as you can see, there are over 1,000 tips that you can access through having this app. And as I mentioned, you can go to vroom.org and access the Daily Vroom app and also download some of the resources that Candy mentioned earlier, all for free. And this is what the Daily Vroom app will look like in your web browser if you access it on a computer. So again, this is great for parents. If they don't have a smartphone, they're able to go to the library, maybe use a computer, or if they have a computer at home, they can access it there as well. And here's another image of a tip in the Daily Vroom app through the web browser. And here you can see the tip alongside the brain building. We have critical thinking and working with others listed here. So Vroom has several categories you can access through the app. Here are a list of a few categories. We have some with chores, everyday routines, little scientists, let's focus, little detectives, practice patience. Again, Vroom is coming to you where you are. These are all practical things that a child and adult might do throughout the day. And so you can easily go into any of these categories to get an age-appropriate tip to do with a child. And we have some more. We have let's get dressed, anytime adventures, out and about, eat up, stretch, wordplay. Again, very common categories of things that we're already doing with children. We have memory master, let's play, chat, be kind, bedtime activities, look, get creative, follow, and take turns. So if you haven't already, take time to explore the Daily Vroom app, either on your phone or on the web browser, and just start clicking through some of these categories and seeing what the tips are like. And if you don't have a child, you can definitely put in your own made-up child in your app like I did, and you can just give them a birth date, and that will know what age they are for their age-appropriate tip. And you'll start to get tips and kind of see what the differences are based on the age range and the different categories. You can also choose to get a tip at the same time every day. It'll come in with a ding, an alarm on your phone, and you get your tip. Or you could just go into the app and just choose any of these categories here. So now we're going to go over some more brain building resources that you might have seen or heard of. So here we have the tip ring, and this has a sample set of Vroom tips of all the age ranges. We have the postcard that talks about the app and what Vroom is, the information card. We have the brain building basics flyer and the brain building story flyer, and a Vroom bag that also includes a Vroom tip. So all of these materials are available in English and in Spanish. And you can also set up a store account where you can purchase these through your agency if you would like. But remember, you can download the tips and the flyers and the postcards for free on vroom.org. Here are some more materials here. These are posters. Again, you can download these for free on vroom.org, or you can purchase them by setting up a store account with Vroom. And we also have a shirt, which is very popular if you like to purchase shirts for your team to wear when you're doing outreach events. And we have the baby card that has a tip at the bottom that's good to share at events. And one thing to note, we have more materials here. We have the keyring, which is fairly new. We have clings, which you can put on windows, and stickers are very fun for events. And these have quotes on them as well. So although all of the materials are in English and Spanish, there are select materials that are in Russian, Vietnamese, Arabic, and Chinese that you're able to download for free on vroom.org. And here just shows an example how Vroom has partnered with some brands to put brain-building tips on products to meet parents where they are. So we have Johnson & Johnson, and here you can see there's a tip on their baby lotion. We have Goya has it on their pasta and Marie's cookies. So again, these are ways that Vroom has partnered with brands to bring brain-building tips to parents and meet them where they are. And so Candy mentioned earlier about some of the YouTube videos from Vroom to go visit those. So if you do go to youtube.com/joinvroom, you can access all of these videos. What's great is that they are short, but really to the point. Up here at the top, you can see that these are actual families engaging in Vroom tips. And then if you keep scrolling towards the bottom, you'll see some animated videos. Again, they're very short. And then the most popular, you have What It Takes video and the Brain Building Basics video as well. So please take time to visit youtube.com/joinvroom to see all of the videos that they have to offer. They're great for sharing in presentations and trainings, or even if you have a tablet or computer at an outreach event. So now we're going to go into a few questions that we get about the Daily Vroom app. So the first one, is there a charge for the Daily Vroom app? No. The Daily Vroom app is free, and you can download it again if you have a smartphone or an Android or iPhone, if you have a tablet. Also, again, you can access the app on vroom.org. And again, so you don't have to have a smartphone. So that's what's great about it now, that you can go to the web. Is the Daily Vroom app for adults or children? So the Daily Vroom app gives you suggested activities that you can do as an adult with children, and then the children can actually see the progress and the badges that they're collecting by engaging in these activities through the app. But this is not an app necessarily for a child to do on their own, but it's an app to give you a suggestion of activities to do with children. So you don't have to worry about any screen time for children with this app. How much storage will the Daily Vroom app use on my device? So we don't have one correct answer for this, but we have noticed that it ranges from about 10 to 13 megabytes, and it varies depending on what device you're using, or if you're saving photos through the app, which you can do as well. So it just depends on how you're using the app, but typically it does not take up much space on your app compared to other applications. Is there a Spanish version of the Daily Vroom app? Yes, So you can access all of the Daily Vroom app in Spanish as long as you have your phone set to Spanish. Can you add more than one child in your Daily Vroom app? Of course. So you can add multiple children. Again, you're going to put in their first name and then put in their birth date, and that's how you'll get those age-appropriate tips. So if you have a classroom full of 5-year-olds and you want to add all of their names to get personalized tips, you can do that. Or you can just add one child's name and start to get tips for 5-year-olds. And since you have their birthday in the application, as they get older, the tips will start to change with their age. And again, this is for birth through 5. What if I have children older than 5? So we get this question a lot. And Vroom activities, these tips, they can be used to support children older than 5. Again, but the app is set specifically based on age ranges, but anyone can use the Vroom app. Can I get reminders to check for tips in the Daily Vroom app? Of course. You can adjust your notification settings and receive an alert any time of day. So if you want to receive your tip at 9 a.m. or 5 p.m., you can set that. And if you want to silence it for a few days, you can do that as well. And here is another way to access the Vroom tips through Alexa. So a lot of people have Echoes. So if you have an Echo, you can actually set up an Alexa skill for Vroom in your app and start using your Alexa to get tips for your children. Again, everyone has what it takes to be a brain builder. And when you have time, we really encourage you to go to YouTube and watch this video about everyone has what it takes to be a brain builder. Now I'm going to hand it back over to Candy to wrap up.
Thank you, Patience. So we're going to do just a little reflection on today's webinar. And after you view the webinar, we'd like you to pause and reflect on a couple things, maybe even write them down, because we will be discussing and reflecting as well on today's webinar at our January 9th group TA call at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. But if you would reflect on a couple things, one being, what were some of the initial ideas or concepts that really resonated with you today during the webinar? Was it, something about some of the research on early brain development? Was it part of Vroom's tools or concepts or messages? What were some of the initial thoughts that you had? What were some things that resonated with you? And please jot those down. And also, what are some of the initial thoughts that you have for sharing Vroom's concepts and tools with providers and families? So as you were listening today and looking at the slides, were there thoughts that came to mind about how you'd be able to integrate Vroom's messaging, tools, and concepts into your outreach through your child care resource and referral? These initial ideas and thoughts that you have can serve as a springboard for more formal planning with your agency for Vroom outreach in the near future. So we'd like you just to take some time to reflect on this and write those ideas down. And you can bring them with you to our first TA group call, but also feel free to email us as well. You can email us at vroom@usa.childcareaware.org with any thoughts or questions that you may have. And there's our email. It would come directly to Patience and I, and we will respond to you. And we just want to thank you for taking the time today to view the webinar and to start thinking about what Vroom outreach is going to look like through your child care resource and referral. And also we encourage you, after you've viewed the webinar or as you're viewing the webinar, to involve other people in your agency that will be connected to your Vroom outreach so that they also can become familiar with Vroom.
All right, thank you everyone for joining us, and we look forward to discussing further on our first group call.